Before we get to Senator Markwayne Mullin, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
I said something that was pretty simple and non-controversial, and that was that members of the military should follow the law. And in response to that, Donald Trump said I should be executed.
Senator Senator Mark Kelly, treason. That's what it borders on. Senator Kelly is in the Pentagon's crosshairs for taking part in a video urging military members to challenge illegal orders. No joke. They really need a challenge from former military members? Are you just trying to undermine President Trump on the world stage? I think so. He thinks so too.
Number 2.
Putin wants legal recognition for what he has stolen, to break the principle of territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Presidential projection of power on the world stage is on display. China, Russia, and Venezuela. We will update you on all three and explain why I think we are all safer because this president is confronting our greatest challenges immediately.
Number 1.
Some are going to come down in weeks, some are going to come down in months. We just had in terms of affordability, we just had the best month in the housing market due to affordability, due to increased supply, best October in 3 years.
But we're not there yet as a country. Healthcare fix on hold for now as the president and his team go all in on affordability. Can he drive prices down in 26? How do you view the economy in your world with your family? Whatever you say is the right thing. Senator Markwayne Mullin, welcome back, Senator.
Hey, Brian, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for joining me on this Tuesday leading up to Thanksgiving. First off, what's going on with health care and a compromise? Have you been read into what the White House is working on?
Well, actually, I had a meeting with the president yesterday at the White House, and I can tell you he's laser focused. His entire team is laser focused on getting health care that actually works for the American people. What we do know for a fact is that the Affordable Health Care Act, that aka Obamacare, isn't affordable. It's not working. It's went up 200. Premiums went up 231% since the conception. Even though we were told it would go down 25%. Premium packages in our healthcare plans are very narrow now. So we have to work on how do we get there, but it's very, very complicated because, truthfully, affordable health care, aka Obamacare, it destroyed the market and the ability for choice, and it subsidized so much of these healthcare plans that it changed the whole makeup of the way the healthcare industry did it by grouping everybody together. So it took healthy individuals, put them with the very sick individuals, and it took away the freedom of choice for those plans. And since there's less plans, the healthcare industry is like, when we lose healthy people, we have to raise the price for the sicker people. And there's a couple of options that we've been looking at. One, we have to make changes to Obamacare. One of them is, what is it that is Obamacare that made mandates that each healthcare plan had to cover. I mean, some of it had to cover catastrophic insurance. Well, not all plans need catastrophic insurance. Some of it, a lot of it, mandatory that it carries maternity care. Well, a healthy male doesn't need that, or a 60-year-old female doesn't need that. And so, how are we taking out some of the mandates that are required, and then how do we still keep the free market available? Mm-hmm. How do we treat healthcare more like homeowners insurance or auto insurance? Right? You got a driver that, Brian, that doesn't ever have a ticket. He or she's never had an accident. Their auto insurance is much cheaper than the guy who drives fast and has accidents all the time. Well, a healthy individual that takes care of themselves, that's not obese and never smoked, never drank, probably shouldn't have the same coverage and have to pay the same premium as the guy who doesn't take care of himself. So it's very complicated. We're working with it. The president's laser focused on it. The thing is where the Democrats work with us, and that's the problem. And I don't know how you get past that impasse.
So they just want give the subsidies that were there to the healthcare companies. And that's not going to work. 2 insurance companies. That's not been effective.
Well, all they want to do is try to subsidize insurance companies to say we'll pay a percentage of the premium, so therefore the person can bring down their insurance, but it really doesn't bring it down.
Yeah.
And what the president's point is I don't want to give the insurance companies a 1 penny. I mean, their stock prices went up from pre-Obamacare from $30 a share to some of it's $330 a share now. They're making a lot of money, which is fine. We want them to make money. But at the same time, American taxpayers are subsidizing that.
It's crazy. Senator, the other thing to keep in mind that you know is that Aetna, Cigna, United, they all dropped out. They said the exchanges, we're losing billions by doing these exchanges. So the theory with Obamacare, and I can't write the book on Obamacare, so I haven't memorized all the principles. It's been so long. But a theory was that these companies would be competing for individuals, and it would drive the price down. But they just bailed out and said, this is not going to work. All I get is sick people. And then the president got rid of the mandate because it's unconstitutional. So that means you're not going to fine me $1,000 because I don't take Obamacare anymore. So they couldn't even use that money. So this thing is falling apart. But how do you fix it in real time this year is the key, not to rehash what happened in 2016.
Yeah, it's 100% true. So, and I can tell you some of the things that we've been throwing out. It's starting HSAs, which is healthcare savings accounts for individuals, rather than giving subsidies to the insurance companies, we give it to the people that's buying it. We start working with the states to say, hey, what is the sickest population? The sickest population really isn't the elderly, it's the pre-existing conditions, ones that have specialty medicine that costs a tremendous amount of money, specialty care, and it's long-term care. How do we take the $40 billion a year that we're giving to the insurance companies, give that to the states and let them take care of those with pre-existing conditions, and how does that work, and how can the state manage it? And it not get so ridiculous that they treat it like disability, like Social Security disability, where they put everybody there. How do you actually have people that qualify for it? That's a conversation that took place yesterday. How do we bring back the free market? And we need to do this pretty quick because we want to avoid another shutdown, and we're afraid the Democrats are going to lead us to another shutdown, because the truth is the reason why they reopened it was Ledge Branch didn't, since it was closed, Ledge Branch didn't pay their staff. Well, we reopened it. The SNAP program with the ag, we reopened it and we funded it. So there's not SNAP that's going to be able to be shut down, and Ledge Branch, which funded their staff, isn't going to shut down. So really afraid that they'll take us straight into another shutdown. So we really do want to work with them to fix the healthcare system, not patch it. There's a difference. They want to patch it by putting more subsidies. We want to fix it to have the free market work again, and the conversation isn't going well.
Really? Okay. So I had Senator Shaheen on, and she says that you guys were showing bipartisan cooperation. I had her on television today, but you don't think that's accurate? Well,
one thing we did go by there is the president said he wants to really work hard on a bipartisan manner, but there's an impasse that we're going to have a very hard time getting away with, because the Democrats, they want to basically leave the Hyde Amendment out of it, which is the Hyde Amendment, for your listening audience, it prevented federal tax dollars from being able to be used for abortion. It doesn't prevent abortion. It doesn't prevent the state. It just says federal tax dollars can't be used for it. Well, since we subsidize so many of these programs, especially with HSAs, which is federally subsidizing healthcare plans, but it goes to the individuals, we have to have something that's an assurance that can't be used for abortion, because it's the law. Hyde Act is the law. It's the law. And there's a big impasse on that they don't want Hyde protection on HSAs. And so if to do that, then we would have to literally pass a law to get away with the Hyde Act. And that is a very difficult impasse for the Democrats to get past. And right now, that's where we're stopped on. And it shouldn't be. I mean, it's like I said, that has been the law of the land for decades now. And they're trying to do an end around on it. And we're just saying, we're not trying to change the law of the land. We're not trying to make this about abortion at all. That's not the case. We just got to make sure that we're not breaking the law with a law that we write, unless you guys are wanting to do away with the Hyde Amendment, which isn't going to pass. The American people do not want to subsidize abortions.
I think that's pretty clear. So, Senator, The other thing you could do to avoid January 30th, get all the appropriation bills done and passed, right? And you got how many are left?
In a perfect world. Yeah.
How many? Is that not realistic?
Well, I mean, you got to think 4 years underneath Chuck Schumer running the Senate and 4 years of Joe Biden, they didn't pass a single appropriation bill. They CR'd everything. In the last 2 years, they didn't even bring one to the floor. So Chuck Schumer doesn't want to do appropriations. He wants to do a CR. Why do the Democrats want to do a CR? Because a CR is a continued resolution of Obama-era spending. So we need to do appropriations. The House can do appropriations. The Senate, we have to have 60 votes. And we only have 53, and you can take Rand Paul out because he never voted for any spending bill, so that means we start at 52. And so we have to have 8 Democrats to support any funding bill. We can probably realistically, since we've already did 3, we can probably do 4, maybe 5 more. I know we should be able to do defense. We should be able to do CJS. We should be able to do THUD and Interior, which CJS, by the way, is Commerce, Judiciary, Justice, and oh my Lord, I forgot what S is. Everybody's going to be making fun of me on that one. And so just for people to understand, the Interior deals with our public land, Native American issues, a whole bunch of stuff. And so if we could get those 4 done plus the 3 we already have done, that basically funds 87% of discretionary spending. And so because that's 7, so the last 5 bills is 13% of the government, which you could realistically do a continuing resolution on the rest of it because the other ones are very difficult to get through. So Brian, I'm not holding my breath that Patty Murray, the ranking member of Appropriations, I sit on Appropriations too, but she's the ranking member of it for Democrats, is going to work with us because even though all these bills that we're talking about have passed bipartisan, I'm talking about like 25-2 out of the committees, but when they get to the floor, these people that voted for them out of the committees aren't voting for them on the floor because Chuck Schumer is telling them not to.
Right, and you got to get to 60. But to get out of committee, you could do the committee with a simple majority, right?
Yeah, well, but they're already out of committee, but they've already passed out of committee by overwhelming bipartisan support. That's what I'm saying. We've only had 2 people out of the appropriations that's voted against the appropriations, so it's like 25-2 that they've come out of the committee. So they come out to the floor bipartisan. Typically, if you vote for it out of committee, you vote for it on the floor, but that hasn't been the case in these appropriation bills that we've tried to bring to the floor. They've stopped every single one of them. So
real quick on Venezuela, it looks like the president has declared a certain group a terror group. It looks like we have aircraft carrier, we have air assets, naval assets 7 miles off their coast. It's very expensive to keep this type of firepower in the region. What could you tell our audience? Where are we heading?
Well, we're not putting boots on the ground in Venezuela, but we're protecting international water to keep the drug trade and the human trafficking from coming back and forth on our shores. What the president is doing here is being very proactive. I get people, the Democrats and some of the other people say, it's a waste of money, it's expensive, but what's expensive is fighting the war on our own streets. We've had more deaths because of these cartels bringing in narcotics, fentanyl, and other drugs into our streets. In 2024, we had more deaths than we did in the entire Vietnam War. And so it's affected every single one of us. It's affected every one of our communities. It's affected our families. Yeah. It's affected our friends. And so the president is saying, listen, we're protecting international water that you're trafficking this through. And if you want to be too proactive, we're going to continue to take this fight to you. So the last time we were actually able to do that was underneath Ronald Reagan, when he was very proactive in entering into Central and South America and stopping the drug trade there. And we saw a huge drop in drugs. But the president's not only just doing it in international water, but you got to remember what DHS is doing here inside the United States and ICE is. They're breaking up these drug rings in these major cities. It's not just going after federal fugitives, which are illegals that are in this country illegally because they are federal fugitives. They're breaking up the drug rings and the trafficking rings that's trafficking the dollars in and the drugs in and the dollars out. And they're also breaking up the distribution of it in the city. So we're having a full press of it, and they are terrorists. They're terrorizing. These are domestic terrorists, international terrorists that are becoming domestic terrorists that are terrorizing every street, every town, every city and every state in our country.
So do you think the conversation between Maduro and the president is simple? You got to go, and Russia will take you.
Yeah, we've made it very clear. We'll allow him to leave the country. You have run a country that was at one time the shining example in Central and South America. They were a perfect example of a partner of ours.
Yep.
We worked very closely to him. He's run the country. Literally, he's destroyed the country. And we're saying, hey, leave. We will let you leave. Or even though we have a bounty on your head, we will let you leave. Go to one of these countries. Go to Russia if you want to. But you've got to leave. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to choke your country out.
I hear you. That's a nice phrase. Senator Markwayne Mullin, thanks so much. Interesting time. So glad you're there. Appreciate it. So let's bring in Dave Ignatius of the Washington Post. Dave, welcome back.
It's great to be with you, Brian, as always.
Okay, so the 28 points on that page were very pro-Russian. I got it. Since that time, Rubio has taken it on head on. It's down to 19, and both sides feel much better about the 19 points bringing us to peace. Now, as we head to the UAE, where Russia has an emissary, and we send our Secretary of the Army, Driscoll, do you think the Russians are going to play ball?
So they've been playing ball. They initiated this process by saying what they'd like to see in a peace agreement. The Russians are suffering in this war as the Ukrainians are. I think the key days are ahead. Thank goodness the Trump team, Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, and others realized that their initial 28-point draft just leaned too hard toward Vladimir Putin, and they made some changes. I wrote after talking to members of the team on Saturday that they were going to do that they understood that Ukraine needed more in the way of security guarantees, and they needed assurances. My piece said that they had 100% commitment from the U.S. for continued sharing of intelligence, which, as you know, is crucial. So now the question is, now that this thing is more balanced, less pro-Moscow, what are the Russians going to do? I mean, how much do they want peace? What leverage does the president really have to get them on board? From the beginning, I have felt the Trump's desire to get peace, to get an end to this terrible war in Ukraine, was something that people should support and work with him on. But it takes two to tango, and we still don't know what the Kremlin thinks. I
mean, put it this way: if they're engaged and they want peace, I'm sure we're going to get something. But my sense is Vladimir Putin might not want it. And even though the Rosneft and the Lukoil, I think, is going to hurt, and it's certainly going to hurt the India purchases of their oil and gas, I'm not sure. And the way I understand it, you may have better sources, Dave. The way I understand it is that after the Gaza deal, October 22nd, Jared Kushner, flying back with Witkoff, said, let's focus on Ukraine. And they came up with a plan. They said, let's go meet with the Russian Dmitriev, and they met in Miami. And that's what prompted this. I didn't think the Russians reached out. And I think that does matter. It might show the level in which they're willing to talk. Is that how you understood it?
That's basically the same understanding. I think it did begin with Witkoff and Jared and the desire to repeat the success that they'd had in Gaza. They saw that where the Gaza talks were opened after the Israelis unwisely attacked Qatar, trying to go after Hamas people there. In the case of Ukraine, there was what they called an inflection point because of weakness on the battlefield for Ukraine in Donetsk, and also the big corruption scandal. So I thought, here's an opening, but in a sense they were realizing Ukraine was weak and might be more pliable. I think they've come, and then they did talk to the Russians. But I think this process has gone the way it should. They had a proposal. They got a lot of pushback. They listened to it. The truth is, if this is a pro-Russian peace deal, it's not going to work. The Ukrainians won't accept it. And even if they did, it wouldn't be stable. It wouldn't last. So I think people are now in the zone where they could actually get somewhere.
So Dave Ignatius is our guest. So Dave, what do you think effective security, acceptable security guarantees looks like? Is it troops on the ground where they decide the border, the new Ukraine border is. So getting back that 18% of their land's not going to happen. Giving up Donbass, all of Donbass, I don't think that's going to happen either. So having said that, what does legitimate security guarantees look like for Ukraine?
So my model for this, to be honest, is South Korea. The Korean War ended without a formal peace agreement, but with an armistice. But there was enough of a guarantee in the form of U.S. troops, mainly, in South Korea, that South Korea became one of the miracles of the world after that war. Just enormous growth, successful democracy. It's a country that just went from basically 0 to 100. So that's possible for Ukraine, but if they have security on their side of the line of control. So I think that security does require troops at least to be able to move in and out of Ukraine. In one of my pieces, Brian, I described one idea that the Trump team has, which is let's give them Tomahawks after there's a peace deal, so that they would have deterrent. If the Russians messed around, they have Tomahawks that can hit Moscow. They wouldn't use them unless they were provoked, because if they did, they'd lose all U.S. and European support. But they'd at least have a backup. I think that kind of idea, the issue is deterrence. How do you deter Russia in the future? Things like Tomahawks, things like troops are going to have to be part of the package.
So, Dave, for people listening to us right now that keep saying things to the NATO on both sides, Ukraine, that's not our problem. That's Europe's problem. And Russia, they feel threatened by NATO. It's our fault for expanding NATO too big. What do you say to those people?
So the first thing I say is we didn't invade Ukraine. Russia did. Joe Biden didn't invade Ukraine. Vladimir Putin did. And he did it because of a misconceived idea that Ukraine is part of Russia. It isn't. It's its own country. That's a formal matter of international law. And you can't just invade other countries and expect to topple their governments. That's not how the world works. So I would say that, we have an interest in that basic rule of law, because that's stability in the world depends on it. I personally admire the Ukrainians enormously for the way they fought back. I just think in terms of the human qualities that we admire, that we give thanks for at this time of year, they've really displayed them, and I don't want us to walk away from them. I'd say to friends I meet, let me tell you about what it feels like in Kyiv when you go there, what you hear from people. Just to think about this not in terms of our politics, but in terms of their, commitment, their suffering. I've been in the hospitals and seen the amputees who want to go right back to the front. Why? Because it's their country, because they believe in it. So that's what I'd like my folks, my neighbors, my friends to understand about this conflict. And
just to understand, if this ends the wrong way, we're just going to be back again. Maybe it's going to be the rest of Georgia next time. Maybe all of a sudden they're going to decide that Estonia never really belonged to be free. And Lithuania was provocative. They'll make up some story that we got to go take parts of Lithuania back, let alone, more formidable countries like the long border between Finland. So they have to know that this is not going to work and that we're going to be there to back up our allies. And our allies from here on in have to understand they're going to have to buy the weapons, hopefully from us, to defend themselves.
You said it just right. Our good name as a country has to mean something. When we make an assurance from administration, it has to be something real there. People are going to just have a different opinion of the United States of America, which is not good.
So we understand there's a couple of things that are going to happen. Now, with Driscoll getting, I guess, read in, he's going to go over the UAE. And we're going to see if Vladimir Putin is sending somebody there that wants to get a deal done. And if they feel as though Russia's playing ball, Zelensky's going to come to the U.S. and meet with Trump and talk about land specifically. Is that the scenario you understand it?
I think that's right. I think if the UAE talks go well, and it's very interesting, I would note to see the growing role of Dan Driscoll, the Army Secretary, close friend of J.D. Vance's, the Vice President Vance's, in this process. But if those talks go well, I think we will have a next meeting. I think President Trump, quite reasonably, wants to get this done while he thinks there's a moment. I have to say, I don't see Vladimir Putin ready to make a deal. He doesn't. I don't think he wants peace, Brian. I think he wants victory. And President Trump's saying you're not going to get victory. The time is to settle this war. If he refuses, then Trump has a real dilemma. What does he do then? Because he's going to have to significantly increase U.S. pressure. I couldn't predict what he'll do, but if Putin says no, and I think you have to bet, 60-40, he'll say no, then it really gets tough for the president.
No question. Now, China makes a call yesterday to the president. Now, they say the April meeting is now set, and they talked about things, including Taiwan, which is significant. But he also talked about Ukraine. Russia, if China wants this war to end, it ends tomorrow. So what do you think China could possibly have offered, if anything?
So I think China's price for doing more than it's been willing to do to lean on Russia to end this war is a significant U.S. move on Taiwan. And I think that's a tough call. President Trump does not have as strong a commitment to Taiwan as some of his predecessors. I think he sees it more as a supply chain issue. He wants the chips from Taiwan, but Taiwanese its status vis-a-vis China matters less to him than even to Biden. Biden said several times he would commit U.S. military forces if the Chinese attacked. So I think that's the grand bargain that China would envision. We'll help you solve Ukraine if you'll help us solve Taiwan. That's a reach. That would be very destabilizing.
That's the only offer. Yeah, of course, that's too much of a reach. But I was just wondering if there's anything else, because we hear the more stories you read, the people that know, they are really hurting economically. And I'm just wondering if there's something else there in terms of... So
if China could help make our sanctions against Russian energy really bite. China is a major buyer of Russian oil, and I just had a little bit of intelligence from one of our European allies that things are not going as well for Russia, either on the battlefield in Ukraine or in terms of their suffering damage from Ukrainian long-range strikes, as we might think, that they're hurting more than we realize. If that's true, then the Chinese can increase that pain level some without abandoning Russia in a way that might change the calculus for Putin. I think that would be the ideal scenario. They'll help us get to a settlement because they know it's time.
It's amazing, too, because we always seem to miscalculate the strength of Russia when they were the Soviet Union on down. So we probably still don't know exactly how much damage or how hurting Russia is, right?
This report suggested that Russian refining capacity has been hit more, damaged more by Ukrainian long-range strikes than we're generally understanding. That's something I'm going to do some reporting on to see if I can confirm that. But just as Ukraine is vulnerable now, so is Russia. If China got on board saying it's time for this to end, no question that would make a difference.
Lastly, do you think Ukraine needs this to end?
So I think, as Ukrainian friends say to me, this will be a terrible winter. The Ukrainian ambassador told me last week that some wounded veterans had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro as part of a program they have to rehabilitate people. And one of them had said, the one thing is that as difficult as today is, tomorrow will be more difficult. That's where they are, right? I mean, it's through this winter, every bad day will be followed by one even worse. But they're tough, and so I would think they would come through this horrible winter, and they'd still be in the battle. They're going to keep fighting, and the Russians have to calculate that this is not an adversary that's going to quit.
And we're not going to stop because NATO now buys our weapons and we get them over to Ukraine. Dave Ignatius, always great. And I look forward to getting the insight on your columns every day, the Washington Post. Dave, thank you.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you and all your listeners.
Oh, thanks so much. Dave Ignatius. Welcome back, everybody. Brian Kilmeade here. It's my pleasure to bring in Samuel Katz, New York Times bestselling author with more than 20 books on the Arab-Israeli conflict. There's plenty to write about. He's got a brand new book out now called Architect of Espionage, the man who built Israel's Mossad into the world's boldest intelligence force. And there's not a person on the planet who's not in awe of what the Mossad has done. We're able to pull off especially since the October 7th attack, between what they were able to, how they were able to infiltrate Iran, what they were able to do with the world's premier terror force, and that's Hezbollah, and then the way they've been able to help take apart Hamas, even though they're not dead yet. Samuel Katz, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
First off, when you look at what the Mossad has done, I think perhaps the world had to take notice about Iran. The way when it was time to take out Iran's nuclear assets, the knowledge that they had, the assassination of the officers, the location of the facilities, without giving away best practices. How long was Mossad focused on Iran?
Well over 20 years. When Meir Dagan, the subject of the book, took over the Mossad in 2002, he had two primary missions. One was to fight and join the United States and the other international partners in the global war on terror. And second was to prevent rogue nations, primarily Iran, from gathering weapons of mass destruction, specifically nuclear weapons. And a very concerted effort was made to create networks, gather intelligence, become embedded in the very fabric of the Iranian program, so that at a point of opportunity or national necessity, those assets could be taken out.
So there was mass executions in Iran afterwards. They thought everybody was compliant. So was it, do you think you have a compliant Iranian society there that hated their government to the point where there might be cooperation with Israel?
So one of the luxuries of battling a nation like Iran, which is a very strict, authoritarian, religious fundamentalist nation, is that there are a lot of minorities in the country who are persecuted and who would love nothing more than to see regime change. So they are natural allies of a nation like Israel or the United States to assist in doing anything to weaken and compromise the ruling mullahs in Tehran.
Perhaps the most impressive was after the funeral of the president of Iran, when Hamas leadership went there for the funeral, they would basically take it out in their villas.
Yes.
That's absolutely incredible.
The remarkable thing is that after October 7th, Israeli intelligence rebounded. It took a major blow, but it also showed that the focus of Israeli intelligence, primarily the Mossad, was always Hezbollah and Iran, that they viewed as existential threats, and Hamas was a lesser threat. And of course, history proved that Hamas had a potent ability to attack and make Israel suffer. But the real threat, the threat to the existence of the Jewish state and Western democracies nearby in Europe, was Iran and its proxies.
So you were saying before that there was October 7th was supposed to be much worse. What was there was supposed to be a coordination between Hezbollah and Hamas?
So Hamas, for all of the mastery that they've celebrated on social media about how brilliant they were on October 7th, they stole the playbook from Hezbollah. In 2018 and 19, the Israel Defense Forces sealed a group of tunnels that Hezbollah had dug deep in the mountains connecting the two countries. And they were supposed to be used as attack avenues to capture a section of northern Israel, kill scores of civilians, and take scores more back as hostages. The thinking of Hamas leadership was that they will strike on October 7th, the holiday when Israel was not on top alertness. Their allies in Hezbollah would join in with missiles and attacks through tunnels. The Iranians and the Syrians and the Iraqis would see that Israel is at its most vulnerable. It's under attack on two fronts. It would join in, and then there would be another uprising, a third intifada in the West Bank, where Palestinian terror groups would strike out, and Israel would be incredibly vulnerable. And indeed, after the October 7th invasion, Israel fought a war on 7 fronts.
Really? No doubt about it. But Hezbollah was slow off the mark because the communication was not great between the two terror groups?
Hezbollah was slow off the mark because in 2006, the last time it attacked Israel, the blow that the Israelis dealt to them was crippling. And the Mossad also initiated scores of operations, including Ponzi schemes, where it impoverished billionaires who worked for Hezbollah, who were in the Hezbollah leadership. So Hezbollah didn't want to engage in an all-scale war. This was not something they had been forewarned about. And instead they just sent out missiles piecemeal to show the Arab street that they were still...
And they cleared out the northern part of Israel, right?
They did. There were hundreds of thousands of Israelis who were refugees because they couldn't live there because of the rocket attacks. And then when Gaza was more or less stabilized, Israel...
did the pager attack.
Did the pager attack. And the pager attack was perhaps one of the most remarkable operations ever. And it could be said it took 15 to 18 years from conception.
2006?
Yeah. In 2006, after the Lebanon War, I write about it in the book, Mayor Dagan sat with his deputies, and Hezbollah had fought a bitter war against Israel. And they were, one late night, they were thinking, what should we do? And one of them said, why don't we just kill them all? And the operation took its progress. They were figuring how, when, and the pager became one of the tools, then the radios. And it was perhaps the most decisive blow ever against a terror group that up until 9/11 killed more Americans than any other group out there.
And then a couple of days ago, they took out one of the Hezbollah leaders, I think in the fourth floor of an apartment.
Yes.
So the intelligence is incredible. That's the point.
The intelligence is pinpoint and accurate, and Hezbollah and the enemies of Israel have now been so compromised that there is very little that they do that the Israelis ultimately don't become aware of.
It's called, the name of the book is The Architect of Espionage, the man who built Israel's Mossad into the world's boldest intelligence force. And not many people are not in awe, even if you're an enemy of Israel, and there are some, you have to be in awe of what they were able to accomplish and be intimidated as well. And that, I think, will help the Abraham Accords as soon as they get some semblance of peace. But when you talk about Hamas is not dead yet. I was a couple of days ago, they found a tunnel complex with 90 rooms in it. And they said it's the biggest complex we've found so far. But you said that there's a lot of crazy stuff that they already found that surprised them in those tunnels.
The tunnel network exceeds the scope of the London Underground. The amount of money that was used to build it at the expense of the local Gazans is enormous.
Using foreign aid, right?
Using in many cases U.S. taxpayer money, U.S. aid, and all the programs that were ceased. The entire Gaza Strip was to be used as a launching pad of terror. It was. The citizens of Gaza were used as human shields and human sacrifices, and Israel is perhaps the one nation on earth that is first world, that has a European standard of living, that is neighbors with a third world nation, third world entity that fights a barbaric type of war where human beings are nothing more than fodder.
And they get global condemnation if any civilian dies who's never been targeted. Those are casualties that look to be avoided. You drop flyers, you text message people, you move people out the best you can in a very dense environment. But the world likes to condemn you guys when the focus for the other guys is to kill civilians.
Absolutely. Not one Gazan was ever allowed to enter one of the deep Hamas tunnels that could have prevented.
And where do those tunnels go? Schools, mosques,
homes,
yeah.
UN facilities, hospitals, everything that could be termed as a civilian target, as a no-go target. Anything flying the UN flag will undoubtedly host a major network of Hamas tunnels.
And they're all, do you say Hamas is infiltrated everywhere? They're all over the place, all through Europe. And there's certainly have people, we've heard from hostages, and you probably know more. I know you know more. The hostages said that there was direct contact with these protests, these college protests in America.
Yes, well, don't get me started on that. But
I don't mind you starting on that.
Okay,
our audience loves that.
Well, I'll tell you the connection between October 7th and and what's going on today. October 7th proved to Israel, first of all, that forget the nation status, they're Jews, and they're going to be targeted and hunted no matter what. Second, it proved that Israel lives in the Middle East, and all that separates that European lifestyle from third world terror, a Somalia and Mogadishu, is a dirt road and a barbed wire fence. It also proved that the diplomats and the million-pound brains that have tried to figure out two-state solution never got it right. And from free Palestine and from river to the sea is all about eradicating the Jewish state, and that what was the plan all along. And it shows that the next war for the Middle East is already underway. It's not being fought in the rubble of Gaza. It's not being waged in the rolling hills of southern Lebanon. It's being fought on the streets of London, and sadly now on the streets of New York City and at Gracie Mansion and City Hall.
You believe that he is a jihadist?
Mamdani?
Yeah.
I think Mamdani is someone who supports the destruction of the Jewish state. His father is a professor who has glorified suicide bombers, and his mother is a filmmaker who has never allowed any of her films to be shown in Israel out of hatred for the state of Israel. So he was brought up, he was reared and built into what he became.
Samuel Katz is our guest, and we're talking about, well, just let's talk about immigration for a second. It looks like Europe is waking up. First, they were condemning us here in America for doing what Trump's doing. You seal the border, you find out the criminals amongst us. They just today, I think, finally were condemning any association with CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood. But now Europe, for the longest time, they condemned us. But now they're trying to follow the Denmark model. Denmark says if you're going to that Denmark's confining asylum seekers to dorm rooms in a former sanitarium, requiring them reimburse taxpayers. The Swedish lawmakers may require public employers to turn in suspected illegal immigrants, and authorities, France and the UK, are instituting strict language policies, and some are considering one of the most controversial measures, deporting illegal immigrants into countries other than their own. They're finally waking up. And they're realizing they've been totally infiltrated. They're losing their identity. And the illegal immigrants, I don't care about their circumstances. They have no interest in their country. They want to bring their mores and their values to the country they're going to. And we see that France and England is a mess. And they're trying to do it here in Texas, and it just got stopped. But do you think we're sobering up in time, Sam?
I don't know if it's in time. The Democratic left-wing elements of the Democratic Party and the Muslim Brotherhood and those forces have formed what has traditionally been known as the Red-Green Alliance. And they've infiltrated politics. They've infiltrated universities. They've absolutely hijacked the American mind into thinking that the West is bad and everything anti-Western is good. And they've October 7th became a rallying cry. Mm-hmm. It became a cult, a new religion, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. The keffiyeh became the new prayer shawl. The left-wing elements of the Democratic Party became its temple. And social media became its cathedral, where the views are spewed and the hatred is just spread out of control. And it needs to be stopped one way or the other. Otherwise, we in the West, Western nations, in Europe and here, will find ourselves in very dire straits. And Canada is the perfect example of that has gone completely backward in its view of its very core principles and ideals.
Right. And they got a left-wing guy there now who thinks they're better off with China than America. Yes. So that's fascinating. So a couple of things to bring up. Number one, how do you view Qatar?
So Qatar is both the person who sets fire to your home and then the one who brings the hose and helps you put out the fire. They play both sides to the middle very, very well. They are a small nation, one that...
so rich.
Qatar doesn't fight wars, it buys outcomes. And they also, its leaders are avowed followers of the Muslim Brotherhood. And they've hosted the Taliban. Hamas leaders watched October 7th unfold live in Doha. They have so much power in the influence they have purchased they're very, very hard to counter. And I believe that one of the moves made by President Trump to ban the Muslim Brotherhood is one step in the direction to check them in.
Because Qatar's complex, because they come here and they say, hey, you know what, Israel likes the fact that they have somebody to talk to. They know where to reach Hamas when they have to deal with them prior to October 7th. But Sam, we're just scratching the surface. We've got to have you back. Congratulations on the book, The Architect of Espionage, the man who built Israel's Mossad into the world's boldest intelligence force, Samuel M. Katz. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
You know, it always takes two to tango, but it starts with a plan. And it starts with a president, President Trump, who wants to end this, as he did with Pakistan, India, as he has done so successfully in Gaza, as he has done with basically eliminating the nuclear capabilities of Iran, what he has done between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So this is a president really pushing peace worldwide. This is a difficult one. He said that. He said this would be one of the easier ones. No, it was not true. It is one of the more difficult ones. But I'm sure that we will get this done. And yesterday was an important step. And of course, there will be more steps following the coming days.
And the NATO General Secretary, always positive, Mark Rutte, yesterday on Fox and Friends with me. And that's when we thought it was 28 points. I thought most of them were favoring Russia. Now they knocked it down to 19 after working with the Ukrainians. There's no sense that Russia wants to give it all. I understand that. But the only thing that would get them there is if things changed. Number one, the fact is, after a year of losing 200,000 of their troops, they have gained 1 square mile, 1% more of Russia. So they have to go to Africa and have to go to areas of the Middle East in order to get troops. I don't understand that in a nation of 150 million, but they are doing better on drones, and it is overwhelming some portions of missile defense, but I understand the Ukraine's about to unveil a major increase in drone protection. So I think that's really important. Now, the talks go from Geneva, Switzerland, where the Ukrainian delegation, the U.S. delegation is there. Now they switch over to the UAE, where the Russians have an emissary, and the Russians are meeting with, I think, Turkey as a presence, and we're sending over Secretary of Army Driscoll to see if they understand or if they legitimately want to get to peace here. And there can't be any peace for Ukraine without legitimate, hardcore security. Daniel Hoffman joins us now, former CIA station chief, served in Moscow, among his many places. Dan, are you optimistic at all? Or what do you expect the Russians to be like when they get the 19 more towards Ukraine's liking points?
I'm sorry, Brian. I've never been optimistic about an end to this war. I just don't think we have the leverage over Russia to induce Russia to stop their barbaric invasion of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin, his strategic objective has always been to overthrow the democratically elected government of Ukraine. He'll engage in negotiations, but he does it to ensure that he's asserting the primacy of Russia in his self-designated sphere of influence and not allowing the United States to play the preeminent role in bringing peace to the region. He would never allow that to happen. He's always considered the United States to be Russia's main enemy, going back to his KGB days. So I just don't see any evidence that Russia is going to pause in their relentless attacks on Ukraine. They just launched more attacks last night, drones and missiles. They've never agreed to a ceasefire. They've never come to the table with any real interest in negotiating a deal. Moreover, yes, Putin has suffered, his army suffered 1 million casualties, but he's got a high threshold for pain. He just doesn't care. I'm sorry that President Trump cares a lot more about Russian soldiers than Vladimir Putin does. How Putin would declare victory for a negotiated deal that doesn't accomplish his strategic objective, I think that's a problem for him politically. And what he does with the roughly 800,000 Russian troops who come home, that's like what he witnessed when Russia had to return from Afghanistan in ignominy. So I'm sorry I can't be very pessimistic. You know me well, Brian. I served a lot of years at CIA, spent them trying to see the world through Vladimir Putin's twisted KGB eyes, and that's the best assessment I got.
So this could be a long, drawn-out negotiation. They're probably not going to agree with a lot of the changes. They said they liked the Americans' 28-point plan, which was basically written by Russia, their emissary, Dmitriev, I think his name is, over in Miami. And then they brought it forward, and the president said, hey, this looks good. Let's put it forward. And, of course, it didn't look good. It was very pro-Russian. So to Ukraine's credit, they said, let's work on this. And Rubio said, we made great progress yesterday. Now Zelensky says, I'm willing to hammer out about land with Trump directly, but I wouldn't even go if I'm Zelensky until the Russians show that they're willing to accept some changes to the 28 points.
We can negotiate to our heart's content with Ukraine. They're the ones defending their territory and their territorial integrity from Russia's invasion. So it's Russia that would have to stop. I'm sure Putin likes some parts of the plan. Ukraine giving up Donetsk, including pieces of Donetsk that Russia doesn't even control, and limiting Ukraine's military to 600,000 troops. That's a decision for Ukraine, not for Russia to have veto power over. And not allowing European NATO members to station troops in Ukraine, also a non-starter, among other things. But I don't think Putin would have even signed that agreement. I think he probably just saw this as an opportunity to drive a wedge between the United States and Europe, which is another one of his objectives. The thing that we missed, Brian, we could have had a lot of leverage over Putin if way back 4 years ago we had given Ukraine all the military equipment that they needed when they needed it. And now, 4 years into the war, it's a different story. But look, President Trump was elected to chart a new course on domestic and foreign policy, so crying about what happened or didn't happen 4 years ago isn't really in our interest. But I've always felt that the best leverage we could get is by arming Ukrainian to the teeth. I don't think this administration wants to do that, however.
I don't either, but the NATO is buying weapons. I don't know how quick we're producing those weapons because we have not expanded our industrial base yet. Because we know, I guess Taiwan is waiting 2 years. Yep. Have already spent the money, and we have not delivered on their weapons. So I don't know what exactly is happening over there. But I would say this. If you think when the pain gets great and it's in their best interest to end it, they could honestly say they got 18% of the country, and the whole lark of saying they're going to denazify Ukraine, the way they sold it to get in is the way they could sell it after, from their perspective. And right now, they have two major oil gas companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, that are now under major sanctions that now is going to affect India's purchases.
Yeah, I think Putin is totally fine bending his knee to China and relying on China to ensure that Russia's economy continues to operate. And China's fine with that, too, because it gives them leverage in their upcoming negotiations with President Trump, who plans to visit Beijing in April. I again, sorry to say, I just don't see that Vladimir Putin is going to see anything but like the CIA used to call it historical placement. When you look at a leader and think about what historical events impact them today that they went through. And for Putin, for sure, it's the collapse of the Soviet Union, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and all that entailed. Yeah, 18% of Ukraine, that was not his objective. It was to take Kyiv. And if Zelensky's still in power and Ukraine is still a democratic country, well, Putin loses, and he's not going to win. His security guys, military and intelligence services, are going to see right through this. That's why the CIA has been able to mount some good recruitment operations. They see the massive blood and treasure that Putin has spilled. For what? They didn't achieve their objective. They're not going to achieve their objective. There's no way that Russia's going to take Kyiv. Ukraine is not losing. If you listen to General Jack Keane, he'll tell you they're not losing. We have the leverage. It's just a question of whether we want to use it. If we allow Russia to snatch defeat, or victory, I should say, from the jaws of defeat here, that will have an impact on our world standing, including in the Pacific.
Absolutely. This is a bad deal. Donald Trump's legacy will pay the price. That'll get his attention. I think it has, because he's letting other people that agree with you work on this deal. And I happen to know that from the outside. So that 28 points is, when Rubio's in charge, I feel much better. I think he thoroughly gets it. He knows who he works for, and he knows the region. So two things.
Agreed.
The Washington Post came out, and they said Russia had two objectives. One objective was to get the U.S. to stop arming Ukraine. He thought he could do that with Trump. And number one, to break Ukraine's will. I don't think anybody thinks either one of those areas worked. Am I correct?
I don't think so. There have been some tensions between the United States and Ukraine, our bilateral relationship. And Europe has played a greater role in ensuring that the U.S.-Ukraine relationship doesn't rupture and that we continue to support Ukraine. So, no, I don't think Putin has succeeded in any of this. And as as odd as it might seem, as counterintuitive as it might seem, I think that makes him more intransigent about not wanting to make a deal. If he doesn't make this deal, he'll blame it on the fact that the first deal, the 28-point deal, was a good one. He'll lie and say he would have signed it because he wants to drive a wedge between us and Ukraine and us and Europe. But that's patently false, and I'm sure that DCIA Radcliffe is collecting the intelligence to prove that point.
What does security guarantees look like that would be acceptable, Dan, for Ukraine?
I think for Ukraine, it's just a ceasefire at the line of control. Start with that. That's a proof of
But how do we
concept.
stop the next invasion?
Well, I think the first thing you do is you stop this war with a ceasefire. And the way you stop the next invasion is you build out Ukraine's military as much as we need to. We shouldn't put any artificial limits on what Ukraine should be able to build militarily, the numbers of troops, whether foreign troops come in to train Ukraine and work with Ukraine. That's Ukraine's right as a sovereign country to do what they please. Just as Russia is allowed to engage in diplomatic relations and military relations with China and North Korea and Iran, their axis of evil partners. I think we need to go all in. Europe needs to go all in on Ukraine. We need to be the arsenal for democracy. We enjoy $1 trillion worth of trade with Europe. That is going to be at risk if Ukraine were to fall. And the cost to the United States would be astronomical, not just in terms of our reputation, but economically as well.
And you know how much money and soldiers we'd have to put into Europe to fully secure it? If Ukraine, who it's the second biggest army in Europe, falls in Russia's hands, or is forced to live life at diminished numbers. I mean, the way I understand it, they started the war at 200,000, and now they got about 800,000 uniform. And what they've now in the new 19-point plan, which I have not seen the whole thing, but they said it's capped at like 800,000. But if you have reserves, I was talking to one 4-star general still active. And he said, if you have reserves and you have an army of 800,000, I mean, we got 1.4 million in uniform. So if we have reserves, you could easily bulk up to 1 million people quickly. And the thing is, why does Russia care about the size of Ukraine's army? They're no threat to invade unless they plan on invading again.
Well, it's just another violation of Ukraine's sovereignty to say that one country should determine how many troops another country is able to amass. That's just wrong. We shouldn't agree to that, in my opinion. If Europe has to spend more money on defense, they're going to be buying less U.S. goods. If they are concerned about Russia, look, Russia's launching massive attacks, hybrid gray zone operations using drones. They blew up the Germany's military company, Rheinmetall. And if all of that carries on because Putin sees weakness, then Europe will be less of an effective, less of a valuable trading partner for us, and that's bad for us. We want them to make when it comes to guns and butter, look, solve this, make Europe secure, and let Europe go on purchasing goods from the United States. Let us have a positive and valuable commercial relationship. That won't happen if this war ends in Russia's favor. I can pretty well guarantee you of that. I hear you.
If you want to put together a problem, now, I mean, if you want to end a problem, you arm up all our NATO allies, get them to 5%, then you set up a coordinated missile defense between them and an offensive capability if needed as well. And then that would dissuade Russia from the next invasion. Lastly, China called yesterday. I didn't know who initiated, but it looks like China called us, and one of the items was Russia, Ukraine. So I'm wondering, since they didn't have bad relations with Ukraine, their relations were fine. Do you think China's offering to do something?
I think China was, Ukraine's number one trading partner years ago, before the war. Look, I think what Xi Jinping wants, he knows that President Trump really wants to solve this war, and Xi Jinping is saying, I'll help you solve the war, maybe, but I want something from you, and that's related to Taiwan. I'm quite sure of that. There's no such thing as, there's only free cheese is only found in a mousetrap, as the Russians like to say. So I think that China would seek to use this as certainly some opportunity to gain some leverage over us in their negotiations with us and over what they want. And so that's something the president's going to have to deal with.
And the takeaway is
it's a challenge. Yeah, it's a challenge.
And the takeaway is in UAE, you don't expect the Russians to play ball.
Right.
All right. Dan Hoffman, thanks so much. Hope you're wrong, but you haven't been yet. Daniel Hoffman, thank you.
I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah, I hear you.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
You too.